Okay, so we're gonna get on here for a little bit, and I want to talk about private schools a little bit more. I did a short on this, and so if you are looking into private schools specifically for your school age child, here's some information about it. First off, I have over 20 years of experience as a public school teacher. I have not taught private school. I looked into private school teaching as requirements and whatnot, but I never taught private school. I have been a private school parent, and I went to private school at the college level. I did not go in the younger years, elementary or junior high, but in college, I did go to a private college. And like I said, I've been a parent, the elementary, junior high level private school. So if you are new, just starting out, of course, I, have different friends, family, who also have experience with private schools. So I'll be touching on that and just kind of putting it all into a melting pot so you can kind of get an idea of what it's like being a private school parent and some of the experiences my child shared with me and some of the things, what it was like, just overall. Of course, at any level, there's good and there's bad. So I'll just kind of start from the beginning. So with private school and really any school, I feel that it's easier transition the earlier you start. So I have family who they started in preschool, pre-K at a private school. And it just transitions very nicely. And if you're not able to do that, start at pre-K, then of course kindergarten. If you're not able to do the earlier the better. If that's what you want to do, you want your child to start at preschool. It's better to probably start early because that's what they know, right? That's what they're used to. That's kind of all they will know. Instead of transitioning, because sometimes transitioning back and forth can be difficult depending on the child, of course. Some things about private school, of course, they vary depending on where you are at, what's the foundation of that private school. There can be religious private schools and then just like regular secular private schools where there's no like religious foundation. So when you're going into private school, you need to think, what do I want? Do I want something that's a faith-based or not really, just private? Which one are you looking for? Are you looking for the religious, the faith-based background, prayer in school, things like that? Or do you just want a private school, which usually it's private, usually, not always, but for some kind of social aspect of it, like different cultural types of schools, or maybe like historical Black colleges, for example. That might be an example. Different kind of colleges I've seen, Asian American, Hispanic, Native, where I live, Native. There's some Native schools, so it's considered more maybe private, but yet they do some of the things that are public. Anyways, it can be many different reasons, but you need to see why you're going there. Some of them, it is focused a lot on academics, and it's really strong, and that's their foundation. But you can, if you look on the website, usually that school's website, and of course, ask around. Go to the open houses. They usually have open houses, especially around the springtime, kind of around this time. I think I've seen a few billboards in my area advertising the local private schools. So go to some of those open houses, see what it's about. If you want something that's faith-based, then you may, ask people in your church or whatever. If you're looking for academics, of course, Googling, what is the site? They have different search engines that even rate the schools, will tell about the schools, rate the schools. But what I found too is some of the things you won't see, like even on, I think it's greaterschools.org or one of those, one of those sites, it's that they won't tell you why some of the kids are there. you have to kind of dig, ask around, and talk to people to find that. For example, in my area, there's a very popular, well-known, and it's been around a long time, private school, like K-12. But when you dig a little deeper, I found that that school accepts a lot of school kids who are from the public schools who got kicked out. Like they got kicked out of so many elementary schools in that area that the closest one is a private school. So, of course, I mean, if you're going into paying, all these thousands of dollars per month for your kid and they are accepting, have to basically accept, well, they don't have to. Private schools can do what they want. But they're accepting kids who are getting kicked out of public school, then that's something you probably want to know because that ends up being your kids' friends and stuff. Not saying kids can't turn around, but a lot of times when you're spending that kind of money, you're doing it because you want your kids to be exposed or be around or pick up character traits or patterns or whatever. There's a reason why usually you're spending that money. And some of it, it may be religious based. But anyways, keep that in mind. The other thing I want to dig a little deeper that I didn't do on the short was on certifications. Well, I did touch on it, but if you missed it, because I've looked into working at a private school, and here was, at least in my area, and in Florida, the charter schools, which are not public schools, but they do have charter schools that are kind of under the umbrella of the school district. They have some of the training, so that's a little bit different. But up here in the Pacific Northwest, I'm in the Pacific Northwest, and kind of, I've heard this across the board. I haven't heard of kind of your average to upper end private school who you got to check out the teacher qualifications. If you don't care, then just kind of ignore this part. But if you do care, some private schools, as long as you have a teacher certification, they'll let you teach like anything. It doesn't matter. Or you don't even have to have a certification at all. I've seen that. So again, if you're paying usually you're paying something, where public school obviously is free, private school is not. So if you're going to pay money, you may want to know if that's important to you, if the teachers have a certification, and not just a state certification, if they are endorsed in that area. So, for example, in one state, I'm certified to teach K through 8th grade, like all subjects, any subject, it doesn't matter. But then in another state, I'm certified to teach K-6 in all subjects, but K-12 in reading. So every state's a little bit different, slightly, on how they certify teachers. Some states make it very, very difficult. They won't accept another state's teacher certification. They won't. And then there's some states that will accept certain, but not other states. Anyways, so it's not always that teachers aren't certified. Some of it is at the state level, and the states, make it hard for teachers. So they could be qualified, but it just didn't transfer over. And the private school could be like, okay, well, we know you're certified in this state, although our state won't give you an endorsement in K-12. They're just giving you K-6 here, for example, but we're going to let you teach high school, whatever, because in your state that you're from, you're certificated to teach, just not here. So there's a lot of different ways this can go with certification. But if people are from that state, in that state, and the majority of the teachers are not certified, I mean, that's something to look into, especially if you're big on academics, because it can just, it could just be, whoever teaching the class. And although a certification doesn't mean a teacher is exceptional, That's another thing. It's a talent. It's a skill. Either you kind of have it or you don't. I mean, I've known teachers who are certificated and they should not be teaching. They need to look into doing something else, you know. Um, there were some programs, Teach America. This is back in the day, a while back. So don't nobody quote me and get all mad. But back in the day, years ago, I would say probably around 10 years ago or so, in my area, they were hiring my local school district. They were hiring a lot of Teach America teachers. So they were younger, right out of college, had a degree, but I don't even think they required them to have a certification if they were under the Teach America. That part I don't really know, but fresh out of college, and it was a disaster. A lot of they were good in that area of business, like computer science or whatever, and they would teach that subject, math, at the middle school, whatever level, but had no classroom management, didn't know how to deal with difficult kids. I mean, all the other things that go into teaching. They were, young and experienced, all that kind of stuff. And they would hire a lot of those teachers. So going back to private school and teachers. So that's one thing. Another thing to just kind of think about, the reason I personally never taught at a private school is not that I didn't, want to or don't like it. I looked into it. But for me at that time with my family, the pay was substantially less, like half or a third of what I was getting paid in public school. So I've known of other teachers that have taught in private school and they switched over, more than one. I'm thinking now of a few stories. And they switched over to public school just because they couldn't pay their bills. I mean, they're charging a high tuition for kids or higher. I mean, they're paying, sometimes it's more average or on the higher end. And unless if you have a second income or some other source of income or your spouse works or whatever, they were just struggling, So that's something else to think about. So not all teachers, some teachers who can afford it will teach private school. And so you get more parents, moms or whoever, and sometimes they are certificated, or you'll get, maybe older retired teachers, whatever. So that's just a dynamic. I just, make your own decision based on that. But that's just a fact that some teachers don't teach just because the pay. And if you live in an area that's really expensive, high taxes, whatever, working at a private school is just not financially, in the books. Another thing, kind of the culture. So now I'm going to kind of bounce to the culture of being a private school parent, which I have been. Is that the teachers don't get paid a lot, but overall, the gifts are like the parents give nice gifts. The parents are good resources. They band their resources together, and you might have a franchise owner of this major chain that helps supplies, food for different events. You may have, they band together. They use their money, band together, and usually even the gifts, teachers may not get good pay, but like every teacher I've talked to who worked in a private school said, oh my gosh, but the gifts I got from the parents, they kind of help compensate for the lack of pay. Literally, those are the words. So just kind of keep that in mind. That's kind of the culture in private school, where the gifts are maybe not the same as, even with public school, it depends on the area. I taught in a really high social economic area at one point, and yes, the gifts were pretty nice there. But just so you know, like your competition with other parents, keeping it real. Some are like, what is it? Those Pandora jewelry. Another teacher who now teaches in public school but had taught in private school in a very affluent area where I live, but no longer teaches there. but she was like, kind of nice designer handbags. I mean, some really nice lavish gifts. With public versus private, like I said, starting early and continuing on is ideal because that's all your kids will really know. You're paying tuition. Most schools that I know of will require maybe something down, if I remember right, something down, and then a monthly payment or a yearly. You can pay it all up front. You usually have to pay for most major field trips, but then sometimes other things are already included in the tuition. So I think like yearbooks were included. You just, had to say you got one. Sometimes things like that, like the yearbooks are included, whereas in public school, you got to pay for that. But in private school, it seems like you're paying for everything else. Even the lunch was a little bit more, but it was the exact same lunch, seriously, that came from that local district. So the public school district was funding the private school's lunch, but it was more in the private school. Same food, but the private school was more than the public school because, public schools get the subsidies or whatever, the different money to help balance the cost. What else with private school? I've talked on this before in my short, I believe, but I'll say it again. Just because it's a private school doesn't necessarily mean the curriculum, what's being taught, is better. And I've already talked about the teacher qualification. It doesn't necessarily mean that the teachers are more qualified or whatever. I mean, I've worked with people or known of even people too in public school who went to Harvard, who went to Yale, and they're teaching in the local public high school or junior high. And they went to, an Ivy League school themselves or went to even the local private school. So just because, it's a private school doesn't mean they're all from a prestigious high school, junior high, or whatever, a private K-12 or even college. That's something to keep in mind. With private school, think about transportation too. Most, but not all, I do know some that will bus children, but most private schools do not have school buses to pick up your school. So check on that if you're interested in that. What else? Oh, the curriculum. Let me go back to that. The curriculum, like I said, is sometimes the exact same as that local school district. So like I said, go to an open house, ask. I asked those questions. I looked at the library and I was like, oh, okay. So that if it's not up to par or your expectations, you either are going to need to supplement that or just be aware that it's not at that level, or it may be later down the road. They might, be remodeling or whatever. But there are some really nice features. Here's a fun, silly one. Sometimes like the private school bathroom where my child went was a lot better than the public school bathroom. They the private school had automatic toilets, automatic paper towel dispenser. So that was kind of nice, because again, people are putting their resources, a lot of times getting donations from the community. And so if someone has some type of business like that, a lot of times they're donating those things. If you have any other questions, feel free to send me a message on here. Check out my shorts. I have shorts on YouTube. I have other videos. I'm curious. Reach out to me. Let me know, maybe in the comments, some of the other topics you would like me to cover, or if I missed something, what is something you would like me to speak on? And again, my name is Monet Lynette, and do I know my name? It's super late where I'm at. It is so time to go to bed. Monet Lynette, and I've taught for over 20 years. I'm just going to stick with 20 years. I don't want to say the over because then I'm aging myself. But, being a parent, there are guidebooks. Now we can't say they don't come with the guidebooks, but there are some guidebooks out there. But hey, if I can share with you with a little twist of humor on some of my experiences, then hey, come and join me on this journey, my YouTube channel. Invite somebody who's interested and let me know what you want to hear about. Okay, I need to go to bed. Good night.